Ever get that feeling like you're being watched? You know that kind of creepy feeling that someone's there even when you're all alone? Well, imagine that feeling like amplified tenfold, like something's lurking just out of sight in your own apartment.
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
Yeah, it is, right. And that's exactly the reality Mark Reilly faced in his New Jersey apartment, a story that's documented in the Ghost Encounters book series.
Ah, Ghost Encounters. I've heard of that. A collection of real-life ghost stories, right?
Yeah, exactly. And today we're going to deep dive into Mark's experience and try to understand, with your help, what might be behind such phenomena.
Seems fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And what's interesting is how much our views on ghosts have changed over time. Like, the book's foreword even points out that what was once widely accepted is now often met with skepticism.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's like ghosts went from being these kind of commonplace figures to something people just dismiss as, delusion or superstition.
Right, it's like ghost stories used to be a form of entertainment almost, a way to pass down, beliefs and warnings. People believed in ghosts not just as scary figures, but as spirits who might be, watching over us.
Or even needing our help to move on, right?
Exactly. But then science came along and we started looking for rational explanations for everything.
And anything that couldn't be easily explained was kind of swept under the rug, labeled as just the power of suggestion or overactive imagination.
But the book pushes back on that a bit, suggesting that dismissing the possibility of ghosts entirely might be, illogical, especially when you consider just how many first-hand accounts there are out there.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Like, if so many people are experiencing these things, maybe there's something more to it.
Right. And the book dives into this whole question of the soul. If our existence is more than just our physical bodies, what happens to that other part of us when we die? Could that explain these encounters with the unexplained?
It's a question that has intrigued humanity for centuries. And the book really seems to connect this idea of the soul's continued existence to these encounters with spirits.
And it suggests that some of those spirits might be lingering, maybe watching over loved ones, or even needing help to cross over, as they say.
Yeah, it's not always about those malevolent spirits you hear about in horror movies.
It's a different perspective, for sure. It makes you wonder, was that what was happening in Mark Reilly's apartment? Was it a helpful spirit or something more sinister?
Right, well, that's where the details of his story get really interesting. He starts experiencing these strange occurrences almost immediately after moving in. This feeling of being watched all the time, even when he's alone.
Yeah, that's a primal fear, isn't it? Feeling threatened in the one place you should feel safest, your own home.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that the book doesn't really dive into the history of the apartment itself. Was there something about that space that was attracting these experiences? Or was it Mark's energy, somehow amplifying them?
Yeah, we're left to speculate, which just adds to the mystery.
Definitely raises questions about the role of the individual in these encounters. Is it purely about the location, or is there a personal element at play as well? But let's get back to those unsettling occurrences. The book describes sounds coming from his laundry room, like doors opening and closing, drawers being rummaged through.
It's like someone was down there, but when he went to check, nothing.
Classic ghost story stuff. Things moving on their own, unseen presences making themselves known.
It's enough to make anyone question their sanity. But at this point, Mark was still trying to rationalize it all.
Oh, so he wasn't fully convinced it was paranormal.
Right, he was even thinking, that maybe by focusing on these strange events, he was somehow making them worse.
The power of belief, right?
Exactly. Could his fear, his anticipation of something paranormal, actually be contributing to those escalating events?
It's a question worth considering for sure. I mean, think about it. If we're already primed to believe in ghosts, are we more likely to interpret ambiguous events as paranormal?
That's a good point. But then how do you explain the more physical, undeniable occurrences? Like the book mentions these picture frames flying off the mantle while Mark and his son were watching TV.
Now, that's hard to explain away as just imagination. That introduces the question of intent, right? Like, if it wasn't just random chance, was there a message behind those frames being thrown from the wall?
Were they meant to scare him, warn him? It's unsettling to think about.
It's definitely a turning point in the story.
It seems like the real escalation happened when Mark's girlfriend got involved.
Ah, yes. The moment the haunting, so to speak, becomes physical, the book describes her being literally pulled off the sofa with marks even left on her skin.
So it's not just unsettling anymore, it's potentially dangerous.
Right. It's no longer just objects moving. It's an unseen force interacting directly with the living.
And it pushes Mark past the point of rationalization. He tries a more traditional approach, calling in a priest to bless the apartment.
A very common reaction, isn't it? Turning to religious authority for protection.
It speaks to that deeply ingrained human need for, comfort and security when faced with the unknown.
But in Mark's case, it seems to have provoked a rather chilling response.
Yeah, the book describes this mocking laughter, these whispers echoing through the apartment after the priest left.
It's like whatever was there was not only undeterred, but actually found it amusing.
So what does Mark do next? He's tried ignoring it, he's tried the religious approach, and things have only gotten worse. He decides to consult a psychic medium stepping into the realm of the unexplained.
Oh, so he's going all in on the paranormal explanation now.
It seems that way. And this is where things take an even more fascinating turn. The medium claims to discover a portal in the apartment.
A portal. Now we're getting into some intriguing territory.
We hear about portals in all sorts of cultures and traditions, right?
Sure.
Described as gateways between worlds, thresholds for beings or energy to pass through.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept.
And the book actually mentions another story from the series involving a similar portal at a house with the address number 333.
Suggesting a possible connection or a pattern, maybe?
It makes you wonder if this was just a random occurrence or if there's something larger at play.
Definitely raises the stakes.
So if there is a portal, what does that mean for Mark and his apartment? Was it always there, or did something trigger its opening?
Those are some good questions.
Well, according to the medium, this particular portal seems to have opened purely by chance. And unfortunately, the entities passing through weren't exactly the friendly kind.
Oh, so now we're dealing with potentially hostile entities.
Exactly. And that brings up a whole other set of questions about intent and purpose. Questions we'll continue to explore as we dive deeper into Mark's story.
So we've got this picture now of Mark's apartment, acting as a gateway for these potentially hostile entities. And things don't exactly get better from here.
Yeah, things take a pretty terrifying turn for his girlfriend.
The shower incident.
Exactly. Yeah. What's so creepy about it is how normal it all seems at first, She's just taking a shower, going about her routine.
And bam! Hit with this overwhelming feeling of being watched.
It's like that fear we talked about before. That vulnerability of being watched when you think you're alone.
Yeah, it really gets under your skin. And the book does a great job of contrasting that ordinary setting with, the extraordinary event that follows.
And it reminds us that these experiences, they can happen anywhere at any time. It's not always, graveyards and abandoned houses. It could be as simple as stepping into your shower.
Right. It could happen to anyone.
But in this case, it wasn't just a feeling. The book says she pulls back the shower curtain and sees, something that's really hard to describe.
A swirling dark cloud that occasionally forms into this humanoid shape. It's a pretty chilling image when you think about it.
It's definitely not your typical ghost sighting.
No, it's not. And, clouds often represent the unknown, the intangible. And this cloud, it's shifting and changing almost like it's intelligent.
Right, like it has a mind of its own.
Exactly. And it really challenges those traditional ideas of what a ghost is and how they appear.
It's almost like a visual representation of that portal the medium was talking about.
Yeah, like a manifestation of that in-between space, that boundary between worlds.
So we have this portal, potentially allowing who knows what to come through. And these entities that are described as hostile, coming through it. What did they want?
That's the big question, isn't it? Were they just passing through, or were they looking for something or someone specific?
Yeah, were they drawn to something in the apartment, or just wandering?
Unfortunately, the book doesn't really give us any concrete answers. It focuses more on the experience and the emotional impact, but it does give us some clues.
Like the ransacking of the apartment.
Right after the shower incident, Mark wakes up to that familiar sound of chaos in his apartment. But this time it's not just a few things out of place. The entire place is torn apart.
Like someone or something was searching for something.
Exactly, and that suggests intent. These entities weren't just there to make their presence known, they were actively doing something. But to what end? Were they looking for something specific within the apartment? Or was the destruction itself the goal?
It's pretty terrifying to imagine. And for Mark, it was the breaking point. He takes his son, leaves the apartment, and never looks back.
Can you blame him?
Not at all, but it does leave us with a lingering question. What happened to that portal? Did it close when Mark left? Or is it still open?
A gateway to who knows what in an otherwise ordinary apartment building.
And if it is open, are those entities still coming through? Are they still searching?
It's something to think about, isn't it? These stories, they really tap into our fear of the unknown.
The things that go bump in the night. The possibility that there are forces out there beyond our understanding.
And it makes you wonder how you would react if you were in Mark's shoes. Would you try to rationalize it, ignore it, fight it? Or would you just run?
It's easy to get caught up in all the spooky stuff with Mark's experience,
Yeah.
you know? But I think it's important to step back for a second and ask ourselves, what can we actually learn from this?
That's a good point. I mean, as chilling as it is, Mark's story gives us a chance to look at how we approach and interpret these, paranormal events.
We've got the book's perspective, which is, very much on board with the whole ghosts and portals thing. But then we can also apply a more critical lens and ask if maybe there are other explanations for some of what happened.
Right, exactly. Like the book says Mark felt watched from the moment he moved in. But isn't it possible that was just, regular moving anxiety? I mean, moving can be super stressful.
Yeah, totally. Our minds can definitely play tricks on us, especially when we're stressed out. But how do you explain the more physical stuff then? Like those picture frames flying off the wall, that's not just in his head.
Well, the book presents it as a clear-cut case of paranormal activity, but we should at least consider other options. Maybe there was a logical explanation that just got overlooked, like what if it was faulty wiring that caused some kind of energy surge? Or even a loose nail that gave way at the wrong time.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
I would
It's not about ruling out the paranormal entirely, but more about approaching these stories with some healthy skepticism. We need to look at things from all sides.
Right, we can't just jump to conclusions.
And that's where thorough investigation is so important. If we really want to understand this stuff, we need more than just stories. We need solid evidence.
Hard proof.
Exactly. So in Mark's case, did anyone try to document the events? Were there photos, recordings, anything like that to back up his claims?
It's a good question. The book focuses mostly on Mark's personal account, which makes sense given its style. But it does make you think about how objective things really are. Could his fear and the stress of the situation have affected how he remembers things?
Right? Like maybe without realizing it, he was interpreting things in a certain way because of how he was feeling.
It's definitely something to consider. Human memory is not exactly the most reliable thing, and our emotions can definitely color how we remember and interpret events. That's not to say Mark was making anything up on purpose, but just that these experiences are always going to be subjective.
So it seems like there's this tension then between wanting to believe and find meaning in these unexplainable events and the need to think critically and look for evidence. How do we balance those two things?
It's tough, isn't it? I think it's about finding that middle ground, recognizing how powerful these stories are and how they connect with our fears and fascinations, but also remembering to be critical and look for real evidence. We can be open to the possibility of the paranormal without completely throwing logic out the window.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting. It's not just about, ghosts and portals. It's about how we as humans deal with the unknown, the stories we tell ourselves, the ways we try to make sense of the world, even when it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
So, wrapping up our deep dive into Mark Reilly's haunted apartment, we're left with more questions than answers. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the real point of these stories isn't to find all the answers, but to explore the mystery itself.
Maybe the journey is more important than the destination. And recognizing that maybe those lines between the ordinary and the extraordinary, the rational and the paranormal, are a lot blurrier than we think.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and, keep an open mind. But maybe sleep with the lights on for a little while, just in case.